Robert McKee says that storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world. My guest today took her love for storytelling to start her PR agency at 26 years old. She started with 10,000 rupees in 2017, which is barely 600 ringgit or about 120 US dollars with a laptop, and on her grandfather's well-worn couch in a family home, and has since grown it to a 50-person company with 40 plus clients in a few short years. Yet her motivation isn't just about building a great PR business. It's a lot deeper than that, as you will hear in today's episode. Hello and welcome to Season 5 of the Womenpreneur Asia podcast, and I'm your host, Krista Gun. My mission is to uncover the stories and strategies of Asian women entrepreneurs in Asia to help you as you navigate your own business journey. This episode is brought to you by Redbox Studio. If you want to be kept updated on new episodes, join my email list that you can find on womenpreneurasia.com. Today's episode is with an entrepreneur from India, Upasna Dash, who is the founder and CEO of Jajabor brand Consultancy. We had so many things to talk about in this episode, about women in decision-making roles, about being a young entrepreneur, about wanting to do great work, and helping startups get seen. She said that building a business is hard, but building a business as a young woman in a city like New Delhi is even harder. I like one of her quotes. She wants her impact to walk into the room before she does and have her work speak for her. In our conversation, we touch on why women need to make decisions at the right places and be given the right platforms to grow from. Let's get right into her story. Hello and welcome to Womenpreneur Asia, Upasna.
Thank you so much for having me, Krista. Really looking forward to this chat.
So, Upasna, I always ask this. First question, where are you located?
I am located in India, in New Delhi, the capital, the bustling city of New Delhi.
And can you tell me something interesting about New Delhi?
You know, the most interesting thing about New Delhi and the most interesting thing about India is that every 25 miles, everything changes. The language changes, the people change, the food changes. So it's an extremely dynamic country, extremely dynamic city. And Delhi truly is the heart. It's the capital. And, they say if you can drive in India and work in India and build in India, you can do it anywhere in the world. So that's the one good thing to know about India.
And were you born and bred in New Delhi?
I actually was not. I was actually born in a very small town in the east of India called Ranchi. I was there for about 4 years. And my journey to make it to Delhi has been quite interesting. But no, not born in Delhi, born in a very small town in the east of India.
And what made you get to New Delhi? That's the interesting question, right?
I think so many things. I think it's been such a wonderful journey. But just to put it in context, like I said, I was born in a very small town in the east of India. I was born, however, into a very great educated family. My grandfather was a lawyer. My parents, ran successful stints in their professional life. But as a kid, I really struggled to just understand English. So I don't know how many of you all know this, but a majority of the urban schools and areas in India are English speaking. So I did have the opportunity, luckily early on, to enter an English speaking school, but I just couldn't get the language, Krista. And, kids would make fun of me and teachers would make fun of me. I was very concerned because I was not able to communicate with anybody because I only knew my native language. My parents were extremely worried. They tried everything. Nothing worked. I then moved into another urban area called Pune, which is in the west of the country, very close to Bombay, the financial capital of the country. And my grandfather was living with us during those times. And he was like, hey, I'm going to solve this problem. And you know what he did, Krista? He actually lured me by giving me a storybook. The first book I ever saw was Little Women. And I didn't understand anything, except these 4 women who are having an animated chat. And he explained what the book was about. And he said, hey, listen, if you really want to know what happens with these four sisters, you got to learn the language. I was like, my God, challenge accepted. So it's because I wanted to read that book that I worked really hard to actually start speaking English pretty late, I think at the age of 6 or 7. And when I first read that book, I was just transported. And, you know, this is in the 90s, Krista, when we didn't have Netflix and cable TV and all of that. That book transported me into another era. And so did the next book and the book after that, you know, books like Harry Potter Potter and things like that. And I realized, oh my God, this is the power of storytelling. You could be sitting in a small town in India, or a small town in the US or anywhere else, but you can be transported anywhere by the story that you're reading. And from that moment, I knew that I don't know how, but I'm going to dedicate my life to use the power of storytelling. And then I started to see, right, the most powerful ideas in the world, I believe, can be put into the world by storytelling. So that's when sort of my journey began. Honestly, I had no idea I was going to be an entrepreneur, get into PR or anything. I just wanted to use the power of storytelling to make some good happen. So I think that's how the journey began. I did my schooling in India, I did my college in India, and then I really wanted to go and experience the world. And my parents were really incredible. They supported me, and I went to Singapore. That's when I got my first exposure in what's happening in the world. Worked really hard, went into the UK, worked really hard there, and then came back to India, started in a small agency, small setup, then just started to basically build my journey about storytelling.
So when you were telling that story, I found a couple of interesting areas I wanted to go into. What is the language that you speak before you spoke English?
I actually spoke this language called Odia, which is from a state in India called Odisha. So the national language technically in India, or one of the most widely spoken languages, Hindi. I couldn't even speak that. So the kids were like, how do we communicate with this child? So I could only speak my native language. And then I learned English. And then, of course, I learned. And today I speak 5 languages.
The other thing I wanted to ask was, now, your grandfather is a very interesting man. So he gave you a book that made you want to find out more about the 4 women in the book.
Yes.
What was your grandfather doing? Was he like selling books, or was he into literature?
No.
Or what?
So my grandfather was a lawyer. He had a very interesting, unorthodox journey as well. He was born in a very, very small village, again in the east of the country. And he was just so passionate again about doing something big in the world. So at the age of like 13, he ran away from home to go to a city. He did odd jobs and, made enough money to just teach himself English, by the way, and then put himself through law school completely alone. Put in the law school, became one of the most successful lawyers, and that's what he was. But he always had a passion and penchant for literature and storytelling. So I really grew up with having my morning tea with my grandfather, discussing poetry and art and culture and literature, and he's the one who really put me on this path to really discover storytelling. So no, he didn't sell books; he sold dreams.
And what about your parents? What were they doing for a living?
My father was, working in finance and tech. He was actually working with a very large finance company. But when I was younger, he was also working with an American company. My mom was also in the financial services. She took a break after she got married, but she continued to dabble in financial services. So I come from a family of professionals. But I can tell you this fun fact. I think nobody in 7 generations of my family has ever had a business. We're all professionals and, working folks. Nobody's ever been an entrepreneur. So I'm the first one, and hopefully not the last.
So now this is a really good time to ask you about your business. What is your business about? And how did that get started? How did you feel that you wanted to start a business?
My story is very unorthodox. I work with some incredible founders, and I can tell you that like I said, when I was a kid, I didn't grow up saying, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to be in PR. Like I said, the world around me just wasn't like that, right? So I said, hey, I'm going to do what everybody else around me is doing, is go study abroad, come back, get a great job, and just continue to work. But when I came back to India from the UK in 2012, I had taken about a year to just spend some time with my family. And I was actually going to go back to the UK to complete my master's. And my parents were like, yeah, she's not going to last in this city for more than a year. She wants to go back to London. But honestly, on a Facebook post, I found a job in an agency. I said, hey, let me just go and check them out. And that job happened to be with an incredible PR agency. And my first account happened to be Coca-Cola in India, and then Google. And I remember taking it up saying, hey, this is so exciting. I get to work with some really great brands. And I was just mesmerized by looking at this iconic brand and the power of storytelling that it emitted. And to be honest, I was this really young kid and I wasn't, in some big senior leadership role, but I was just excited being around all this knowledge and being around all these great initiatives. So I did that. I did for almost 3.5 years. I worked with brands like Google, Coca-Cola, Nokia, iconic brands. But then I slowly realized that, as much as I loved my job, as a person, I didn't have any creative decision making powers, right? I was a very small piece in a very large, well oiled keg. So I said, okay, maybe corporates is not my thing. And I didn't have the patience to wait for 20 years to become somebody who has some power. So I said, okay, at that time in 2015, by the way, the Indian startup ecosystem was just beginning. So there was some excitement, but it wasn't really out there. So, I met a bunch of really interesting guys and they said, hey, listen, we're trying to build communication for startups. Something big's happening here. So why don't you come? And I realized it's completely the opposite of working with brands like Coca-Cola and Google. It was chaotic, it was crazy, it was mad, but it was also really exhilarating and fun. And one of my first accounts that I really went deep into was Oyo Rooms, run by Ritesh Agarwal. And I was just in awe. I mean, it was challenging, yes, to see the way he was building the company, to figure out communications and startup. Of course, I was working with part of a team, but I got to spend a lot of time just like in the heart of entrepreneurship with folks like Ritesh. And when I started doing that, I realized, and he inspired me, and a bunch of other founders I was working with inspired me. They said, hey, listen, you truly care about storytelling and you want to do it in a way that's not been done before. Just go do your own thing. So in 2017, I just got up and I had a whim. I had no job, I had no savings, I had never known anybody in my family to run a business. But I said, I'm going to do this. And I said, at worst, if I fail 6 months later, I'll go look for a job. But let me start this. So, Krista, in 2017, I had, I think, about 10,000 Indian rupees, which is barely anything, and a couch. My parents said, we're going to give you a couch in our home, and that's all you have. And I remember, buying a credit card just to be able to afford a laptop, which was the beginning of my business. I still have that laptop. And I had one person who chose to join me, and that's it. That's how I started the business. I didn't know anything about running a business, but Krista, what I did know was that my company is going to be built on two very simple principles. We're not PR people who are here to make somebody look good, or we're not here to put a tick box saying, hey, we got you covered somewhere. My job and my mission in life is to use the power of communications and storytelling to help people meet their goals, to make a difference on ground, to really put powerful ideas into the world. I said, that's it. We're not going to be done until a brand comes and says, hey, because you worked with us, I was able to raise funds or hire people or launch a product. We have to make a difference on ground. And that's it. That was my pitch. I didn't even have a website, nothing. I just had this. And I said, give me a shot. And I would go. And again, I would just look at classifieds and say, hey, and nobody would trust me, right? I was this 26-year-old girl with no business card, by the way. I couldn't afford to get business cards. And I said, just give me a shot. And somebody did. And when I did that, they were like, okay, great, we love what you're doing. The second principle, by the way, of my company, which holds true today, is that while we're making these life-changing things happen, we have to build an environment for women and talented people to become part of decision making. I want to enable people, especially from tier 2, tier 3 cities in India, people who don't have mainstream opportunities, to come sit on the decision making table and make a difference. That's it. That's what Jajabor was about. And till date, it's been 5 years now. We've never actually gone and pitched for a business. Every business, touch wood, has come to us because of just our work, right? We have no presence in terms of marketing. We don't go to road shows. We do none of that. We're just absolutely focused on making a difference on ground. And today we are 40 plus clients, 50 people, now in our third big office. We work in 7 countries, all because we're just focused on that first goal. Make a difference to your clients and build an environment where people are living their potential and making a difference. That's it. That's what Jajabor does.
You've given me a really quick version of how you built the company. I like it because it has all the elements of a startup. It has all the elements of hustling. I mean, I don't like to use the words hustle, but you really did build it up from that couch and that single laptop and that credit card that you used.
And here's the irony, Krista. That couch was the couch that my grandfather and I used to sit on. And that couch is still in my office and it's going to my new office. I first thought about building something on that couch. It's more than 30 years old and it's still with me.
How did you, at 26 years old, realize that you want to build a company based on your 2 principles? Or the 2 main pillars that guides you and your team now?
Right.
How did that come about? Because I don't think I was that smart when I was 26.
I think I also wasn't that smart. I think there were two things, Krista. One was that I think I had already honestly peaked, right, in an agency setup and all of that. And I wasn't satisfied. I was like, okay, and like I said, I was very impatient. I would see some incredible people in the ecosystem. I'm like, I can't wait 5, 10 years to make a difference. And I also believe that honestly, Ritesh had a really big impact because Ritesh Agarwal was 17 years old building that company, right? And I'm like, hey, he didn't wait to get to a certain age and come from a certain background to build it, right? So why can't I do that too? So I think that was one. Second was, just the way like life was in Delhi at that time. My dad unfortunately fell really sick, and there's a very simple human tendency when you're in a challenging situation, Krista. You can either flee or you can fight, and that's when I discovered that I will always fight. So I was like, if I have to fight, let's make it worth it. So. It was honestly in the beginning circumstantial. It wasn't like, hey, I've got this epiphany and I want to build a great company. I was like, man, I just want to do great work, and I want to, support my family, support my dreams. Let's see where this goes. It literally started like that.
And when you were building Jajabor, and that I think itself is an amazing milestone from where you were and where you are now. I like to get into the name, which I think is so unique. So tell us a little bit more about Jajabor.
Well, goes back to my grandfather. But so Jajabor, Krista, is actually the name of an Indian song, an Assamese song. And Jajabor in Assamese, which is an Indian language, means nomad. Now, the thing is that, you think nomads are just gypsies or people who are traveling from here to there. But when you hear the song says two things. Number one, that we're all actually nomads, right? Because you're also just passing through the world. You're not permanently here. You're always moving, number one. Number two, more importantly, your mind is always moving. So, he starts the song by singing, I went to Paris and Rome and London. And you're like, wow, this guy went to all these places. And in the end, he says, but I didn't really go there. I sang about it. I talked about it. And because I talked about it, you traveled there. And that to me is the essence of Jajabor. Can I tell you a story where your mind will travel? And this, concept of storytelling, Krista, has been part of human behavior for like generations and millenniums, right? Our ancestors told each other story about, building civilization. Somebody, told somebody a story about building a rocket ship and going to Mars. Its storytelling is innate to human growth and behavior. So I said, man, if I can dedicate my life to storytelling, I can't think of a better name or a better concept to actually commemorate who we are. We're all nomads, hence Jajabor. And therefore, even when I was registering my company, it just came to me. I was like, there is no other word. And even today, a lot of people in India also don't know what that word means. And it's always a great conversation starter. But it's truly the essence of my company, Jajabor. We're all nomads.
And I think that you started off well with that too, because if you start off with a story about nomad, people are intrigued, right? Like, what kind of nomads? Are they gypsies? Or like you say, are we all traveling through life? Now that we know a little bit about your business, so can we get into when you first started on that couch itself? What was the first day like of your business?
It was scary because, like I said, I knew how to do the job. Like, I knew how to do PR. But, honestly, I keep telling my team this, that if you're a great chef does not mean that you can run a restaurant. They're two different skills, right? So doing the job is one thing, but running a business is the other. So I thought, hey, I'm really good at my job. I can do this. But every day was a day of self-discovery, right? How to set up your business, how to do accounts, things like that. So there was a part of it which was really scary and chaotic. And like I said, I didn't have anybody really that I could go to and say, hey, can you help me? But what I did have, Krista, was just unwavering faith that if I work hard and I don't waver from my mission, stuff will happen. And there is also this philosophy, right? It's actually a deep Indian Hindu philosophy, which says, do the job, but don't look at the end result, which is a very strange thing to say for some people, right? But the deeper meaning of that is that do your best, do your absolute best, and just focus on that. What ultimately comes out of it is not in your control, right? So when you're so focused on just doing the right thing. So for example, Krista, I never sat and said, hey, this is what I want my 3-month revenue to be, 6-month. I still don't like doing that. Now my finance team forces me, but I never build my company milestones thinking how much revenue are we going to unlock, how many people are we going to hire. I'm just focused and greedy about how much work can I do, how many people can I work with. If I'm focused on doing that, the people, the revenue, the business will all get built on its own. But if you go chase the revenue or you go chase the people, then you're not really doing justice. So for me, that is the first thing I discovered about myself and entrepreneurship, that you just have to put your head down and do the work. And because the other thing I realized was that actually building a business is hard enough. Being a woman who's building a business is harder, right? Whether we like it or not. It doesn't mean it's impossible. And then I realized that, hey, you know what? I'm going to build my report card so well that my impact walks into the room before I do. So you have to understand, right, Krista? I was 27, 28. A lot of people would not want to take me seriously, right? But I said, I can't change that. What I can change is, what does my report card say about me? So I said, hey, I'm only going to focus on the fact that I'm going to have a really phenomenal track record. So that's it. That's all that I focused on. So I think those two learnings are what really pulled me through, which is why the last 5 years have actually been a blur. Right? It's now when I talk to people like you that I say, hey, I actually did that and I unlocked this. Till date, I'm still focused on, what am I building next? Who am I working with next? What story can I tell? So yeah, and see, as you grow, Krista, challenges don't go away. They just become different. So there's no way where, an entrepreneur gets up and says, okay, now I'm done. I've solved everything. So it's always a learning experience.
What you say there is perfectly true. I mean, sometimes there's this process that we go through.
Yeah.
Process whereby we're learning. And sometimes when we're learning, we're in the flow. And when you're in the flow, you're just so focused on the task at hand and the work that you're trying to do that your mind will not be, of course, the end result is what we're all after.
Yes.
But there's this beauty of being in that moment when you're working in that moment, right? That takes you into you yourself and you feel good. So sometimes this is the reason why I do interviews. A lot of women that I talk to, they have been so busy building their businesses that sometimes they forget to stop and pat themselves on the back.
Thanks, Krista. I think you said it so well. Like I said, I'm only because we're having this conversation is when I realized, wow, these milestones gone unlocked. But you're so right. And it's true of a lot of women, right? Like when I meet them, I'm like, oh, wow, you did that. And they're like, oh, yeah, I forgot to celebrate it, but thank you. But I think that's good.
I also want to go back a little bit into your past. Whereby you were talking about you were working in the previous agency, you worked on Coca-Cola and Google. So how is that different now that you're running your own business, your own agency?
I am so lucky to have started my career in this country working on such iconic brands, working with such wonderful people and mentors. Some of them I'm still in touch with. And I feel like, our mindset at Jajabor and my personal mindset is that there's something to learn from everyone, right? So I think when I was part of a bigger agency, there's some wonderful processes, learnings that I got from my mentors that I've tried to integrate. So that is still a part of, how we are building things. But I think at Jajabor, we have a very, we're basically organized chaos, right? So we know what our milestones and dream state metrics are, and we're very focused on that. But how we get there is very flexible. Like, I think about a couple of months ago, I was in Bombay for a meeting, and I was taking a cab to the airport, and I ended up having the most interesting conversation with the cab driver, who actually taught me about time management and task management, because he would talk to me about how he would, take these many rides to support his family and stuff like that. And I made a memo and I sent it to my team, and I was like, oh my God, wow, there's so much to learn from everybody, right? I actually got a phenomenal management lesson from a cab driver in Bombay. So actually at every milestone, I have found a way, and my team has found a way to learn something from people. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to take the best things from, a great agency setup, like I said, processes and, scaling. And we've tried to marry it with the spirit of this really young and ambitious, crazy startup child. So it's, I think, the best of both worlds. But I think the biggest, opportunity I've had is that I became a founder after being an employee. So I actually am very lucky to bring both perspectives into the workplace, right? So of course I have the vision and, the drive of a founder, but I've lived my life as an employee. So I understand what employees want and what leaders want. So I think that to me is a very important thing.
And are all your team members young?
I'm one of the oldest people, but the average age is, we're in the mid 20s and stuff. And I think, Krista, like you mentioned earlier, the best part about my team is that, again, it comes from a deeper philosophy where I feel like, human beings, I think, are not equipped enough to understand the magnitude of what's possible, right? You can only dream a certain extent because that's what you can see. There's this really interesting theory that my mom and I always talk about, where she said, hey, you know what, even if you're in the tallest building in New York, you can see till say 1,000 miles or 5,000 miles ahead, but there's something on top of that also which you can't see. So similarly, I encourage my team to not put any shackles on decision making of people. So, we are open and excited about 20-year-olds. We're actually interviewing somebody who's 55 years old. We interviewed somebody who's a grandmom who wants to restart her career. We have no qualms. You could be an engineer, you could be an artist, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be a communication specialist. As long as you're passionate about a goal, we have a place for you. I think that's really important, because it's important to encourage like different mindsets and different ways of thinking at the workplace. So yeah, but yes, I'm still one of the oldest people in the organization.
And you're young.
I'm young. I'm 33.
So there's something that I also want to go into, which is women and giving women a space at the table, or
Yes.
at least a chance to do something for themselves.
Right.
Why is this important to you? Or why is this one of the top things on your priority list?
Such a great question, Krista. Truly, I feel like I'm really lucky, right? I think in a country of 1 billion+ people, I'm possibly the 1% of the 1% where, I've had access to education, access to career, and all of that. There are so many talented women in this country and all across the world that have not had that opportunity. And this is my little way of paying it forward, right? And this is very nuanced. Number one, the first nuance is that I'm not saying, hey, I'm going to build something where 1,000 or 5,000 people can come in and do something. I may not be able to do that. And it's not about just giving them a job, right? Very importantly, like you said, it's about giving them the opportunity to be a decision maker at the table. And I think that's important. I have been in rooms where, by the virtue of the way I look, it has been assumed that I can't contribute to decision making, right? And I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of other women. And again, let me be very specific. This is not a generic thing. I think there are incredible opportunities also that I've gotten, being supported by incredible men and women as well. But I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible. So for me, bringing women on decision-making tables was very important. Making women empowered enough to be financially independent is so important. Krista, a couple of weeks ago, there was somebody in our organization who came from a very small town whose bank account we opened, right? And she was the first person in her family ever to have her own bank account, right? These are things that we take for granted, that, hey, I have a bank account. But there are people in this world, in this country, who still don't have that. They don't have their own bank account. And I felt like, wow, we have such a long way to go. So honestly, this is just me paying it forward. I know how lucky I've been. I want to do my little bit to pay it forward. And second, imagine if you unleash the power of women in the world. Just imagine that. Where can we take the place, right? So I think those are my biggest motivations of really building an organization or building, a community where women and, even men from just areas of lesser opportunity have an access to build something bigger. That was the biggest motivation.
Do you have someone, a strong woman in your family, or strong women around you that inspires you?
100%. Like I said, I'm so lucky. And see, there's a variety of these people, right? So my own mom, she hasn't been in a formal workplace in the last 20 years, but she was my biggest cheerleader while starting the company. She helped me handle my admin, my finances. My grandmom, comes again from a very small town. My sisters, my friends, I've, grown up with such incredible women who are making strides in their own place. So I think, again, I've been really lucky to be surrounded by that. But I will also tell you this, I have been so lucky to be also surrounded by great men. My father, for that matter, it was very difficult for him to figure out a way to send me abroad. At that time, it was really expensive to go to a place like Singapore and UK. He prioritized that over everything else and worked so hard to give me that opportunity. So I think really my grandfather and my father played such a big role in making that happen. And it is from him that I realized the value of being independent, being empowered, building something of my own. So there are amazing men and women who played a part in this journey.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think sometimes while we want women to progress and move forward, sometimes it feels like it's us versus them.
Yeah,
when it's not, right? It's not at all.
Right now in my workplace, yes, we are lopsided in terms of the amount of women that we have, but we have some incredible men and young boys in the organization who make us better, right? So you're so right. It's never about an us versus them. It's just about everybody having the same opportunity to build something. It's actually about equal opportunity. That's all. And let the best man win. Even in my organization, just because you're a woman, it's not like you're going to be handed into something, right? We're just giving you a great and fair starting point like everybody else, and then it's up to you and your talent. So yeah, I think men are very much part of the conversation, and there's some incredible men out there who are contributing to this.
And I want to state that because I think sometimes, in our excitement to talk about women and women's issues, sometimes the men feel like a little bit left out of the conversation because they feel like, hey, we're also 50% of the world population. But we kind of get bashed at most conversation.
In my career, in my family, I feel like I've been really lucky to come across both men and women who are equally encouraging for women and, for me to actually go and build something.
Also notice that there's a hashtag associated with Jajabor.
Yes.
It's called Change the Dialogue. Can you tell us a little bit what that means?
Thank you. Oh, it's plastered all over our organization because actually that's the first part of storytelling, right? See, one of the trappings of great storytelling is that a lot of people believe that it's about talking at people. But change cannot happen until two people are part of that conversation, right? So for us, it's not about just telling great stories, it's about changing the dialogue, the conversation between two people, right? Can we change the dialogue when it comes to women in workplace? Can we change the dialogue when it comes to, empowering people? Can we change the dialogue when it comes to creating more financial opportunities? So we're very strong believers of building a strong two-way communication because you can't rise and you can't grow alone. You need a community. You need the other person to be part of that problem and that conversation. Hence, we're here to change the dialogue one story at a time.
So that really fits in perfectly with what you're doing with your agency and moving forward, all the things that you want to do. So now the other thing that I'm also pretty intrigued is that, like you mentioned just now, you come from a family of professionals.
Yes.
And you're the first person in your family to start a business and be entrepreneurial. How does that feel for you? How is it emotionally?
It's incredible. And like I said, it's only this year when I've started to realize, wow, I've actually done it, because the last 3 or 4 years have been such a blur. But it feels great. Again, I think my entire family, immediate and extended, have been so supportive of what I'm doing and what I'm building. But it feels great. And it also gives me a message that just because something hasn't been done before doesn't mean it's not possible, right? You got to just go out and do it, which is why, when we were earlier talking, Krista, I really believe when, a lot of young people come up to me and say, hey, do you think I can start a business? I was like, you have to believe you can start a business, and you can. There is no data in the world that can tell you whether you can do it or not. It's your instinct. Because if you look at it statistically, for me to build and run a business was impossible, right? But statistics don't matter. Your instinct does.
How did you get that first customer then? I'm sure the first customer was like the most memorable customer you ever had.
Absolutely. But like you said, Krista, it's still not easy. Today, yes, we are 45, 50 people at a certain level of scale. It's still not easy. But I think at some point you realize that, it's about building a mindset and system. So like I said, I got my first customer because, like I said, I was on Facebook and someone was chatting with me and saying, hey, what is it that you're doing now? And I said, I'm trying to build something. He's like, in case you're interested, can I connect you? And I'm building something. And that's it. That's how I started. I walked into the office, made my own pitch, and that's it. And it was hard. The first 3-4 months was hard because, like I said, I didn't have that security of an organization or a boss. You have these challenges. Okay, how do I pay this person's salary? How do I pay my bills? How do I move forward? But I think that's when you truly discover who you are. And I was like, man, I'm not gonna stop until I've done a very meaningful, amount of work. So yeah, it was hard then. It's hard now. It's just that my challenges are different.
So it means that as you grow, your challenges get at a different level. It's still
100%.
there are still challenges, but just different sort of
100%. And
challenge.
that's the biggest thing I want to, when people are like, oh, now, so at what time do you think you'll be done? I'm like, there is no answer to that, right? And, like I said, 0 to 1 in the company is a very exciting space. And I think that's what, by the way, gets talked about the most, right? Most of the entrepreneurship stories that you'll hear highlight about how you build something from scratch and build it to a certain level. Of course, that's hard, but I can tell you that sustaining that is harder, right? From going from 0 to 1 is one journey. It's important, but to then maintain it and grow from 1 to 100 is definitely harder, because your scale has increased. There are more people that rely on you. When you fail publicly, not privately, right? I've had failures in the first 3 4 years, but we were so small that those failures didn't count. But today, if we fail, there are many people attached to us, disappointing. Looks get exchanged and things like that. So the challenges don't stop; they become different. And I think entrepreneurs should actually definitely talk a lot more about sustaining. It's not as glamorous as building, but it's equally important.
And you mentioned something that is a favorite of most people is like the failures, right? So
Yeah,
one of the things that I love talking about, not because particularly I love talking about failures, but because I think through failures we learn a lot about ourselves and a lot
absolutely.
about the people around us as well, right?
Right.
So do you have a favorite failure?
All my failures are favorite. But no, I feel on a daily basis, Krista. I think I failed at something yesterday. But I think, my not my biggest failure, but I think my biggest challenge in the beginning was, Krista, I didn't have the infrastructure or the opportunity to sometimes make it to pitches, right? Where we were invited to, present something, and it was some meeting was really late in the night, because it got pushed, and I didn't have a car, and I couldn't take a cab to go to the other end of town because it was unsafe. And I was so frustrated that day, Krista, because I was like, I'm losing out on an opportunity because of something that's actually not my fault. But that's when I realized that, see, either you can talk about all the problems you have, or you can just focus on the solution. So I think that's the mindset. We failed at a lot of things. We failed at, maybe winning some businesses, losing some great people. We make mistakes, we're humans, right? But I actually love failures because it's like a boomerang, right? Like it'll take you 2 steps back and then it'll really thrust you forward. So I know that when there's a big failure, I'm like, okay, exactly a couple of weeks from now, we're going to be bigger, better, faster, stronger. So this is good. So that's my mindset. I love failures because they're like boomerangs.
Yeah, I love your response to that. Now, for someone who's experiencing, and from this conversation, you certainly have a lot of confidence, not just in yourself, but also in your team. That's how you're
Absolutely.
growing it, right? But for someone experiencing a lack of confidence,
Yeah.
what advice do you have for that person?
So important to actually address this. See, number one myth that I want to burst is that no entrepreneur, no matter how confident and successful they are, have a great day every day. It doesn't happen, right? It's just that most people don't publicly talk about the bad days and the lows. The first thing I want to tell people is that you're not alone. Look at the most successful person in your business. That person is having a bad day at some point. So you have to be okay to have that day. What's very important is you have to say, hey, now that I've had a bad day, I'm going to convince myself to get up the next day and show up. So I think the number one, stepping stone to confidence is just showing up. Showing up is half the battle. One. Number two is that, and I learned this a little bit later in life, is that this validation and confidence cannot come from somebody else. There is no client, no partner, no friend, no colleague that can make you confident. Your confidence is completely internal. So you have to actually spend time and nurture yourself. And that's the other thing, by the way, I see leaders maybe not do, and I used to do that too, is that we would take out time for our leaders, for our for our family, for our partners, for our colleagues, but you have to take out time for yourself. Have conversations with yourself, do things that you like, pat yourself on the back sometimes, right? Alone. And work on this. Your entire validation needs to come from you alone. It cannot come from anything else, because if you're chasing that from somebody else, it's you're going to be disappointed. So show up, validate yourself, pat yourself on the back, and you really are your first cheerleader. And they say, right, you cannot pour from an empty cup, so your cup always has to be full, because your energy, your confidence is what enables an entire community of people or a company to work behind you. So most important to do that.
Yeah. I think what you said is so spot on, because a lot of times, a lot of people derive their confidence from external sources.
Yeah.
Which is really dangerous and probably a lot more detrimental to their own mental health.
There is no client, no partner, no friend, no colleague that can make you confident. Your confidence is completely internal. So you have to actually spend time and nurture yourself. And that's the other thing, by the way, I see leaders maybe not do, and I used to do that too, is that we would take out time for our leaders, for our family, for our partners, for our colleagues, but you have to take out time for yourself. Have conversations with yourself, do things that you like, pat yourself on the back sometimes, right? Alone. And work on this. Your entire validation needs to come from you alone. It cannot come from anything else, because if you're chasing that from somebody else, you're going to be disappointed. So show up, validate yourself, pat yourself on the back, and you really are your first cheerleader. And they say, right, you cannot pour from an empty cup, so your cup always has to be full, because your energy, your confidence is what enables an entire community of people or a company to work behind you. So most important to do that. Yeah, like I said, whether it's failures or challenges or any problem, I'm like, hey, listen, let's take accountability, because you can fix what you own. You can't fix somebody else's mindset. You can't fix the weather. You can't fix the fact that cabs are not available. It's not in your control. What you can fix is your reaction to it. So you just focus on that.
And after that incident where you couldn't get into a cab to go and do your pitch late at night, what happened after that?
To be honest, like I said, I was frustrated. I was angry. I wanted to write scathing emails. I became part of some government think tank saying you need to make the city safer and all of that. But then I realized that, I need to build a company strong enough, build infrastructure around me strong enough that I'm never in that situation again. I haven't missed a pitch since, no matter what time of the day or night it is.
That is good to know. So the other questions I'd like to know is, how big is your inner circle?
It's not very big. So when you say inner circle, it's actually, like my closest friends and of course family. And what's really fascinating about my inner circle is that we all come from completely diverse backgrounds. And I love that. That's the other thing about, I think, being a woman in business, is that I'm surrounded by such incredible cheerleaders. And we're all doing different things in life. Someone's running their own business, someone has a corporate job, someone's, running something on social media. We're all doing really independent, very diverse things. But when we get together, we're all cheerleading for each other, which is great. And what the other fun thing is that most of my inner circle is people I've known from very early on in my career in 2012 or whatever. So they're very unfazed, right? For them, I'm still the 22, 23-year-old who's trying to figure out life. It really doesn't matter to them what I built and who I am. So they keep me very, very grounded. And that's fantastic. So very grounded, very close, and full of cheerleaders and incredible women.
So it means that we should really make sure that we have a strong inner circle.
100%. Krista, I'm so glad you brought that up. Very few people actually talk about it. I think that's so important because, when you're building a company, right, you kind of build your own bubble, right? So, and this happens to me very often when I'm in the middle of a big pitch where your reality is that, just your company and your colleagues and, that pitch and everything. But there is a world outside of it, right? So it's very important to step out and put yourself in this other world. And I think inner circles do that, right? Which is why I feel like you you have to balance yourself and invest in meaningful relationships outside of the workplace, whether it's your partner, of course, but definitely maybe two or three people. And it's a very old saying, but you basically are the summation of the 5, 6 people you spend the most amount of time with. So you have to pick those people really well. And what I like to do is I love having a diverse group of people around me because it challenges me, right? Because I may think something is the most important thing in the world, but you go and talk to somebody else, like, wait, there are bigger problems and there are bigger perspectives in life. So it's great to have a very diverse inner circle.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think your inner circle keeps you sane.
Yes, absolutely, 100. And they call you out on things. I love that, right? They call you out and say, "Hey, you're just being ridiculous. You're throwing a tantrum because
Being
it's
silly,
funny."
right?
It's amazing. Being silly. So it's great to surround yourself with people like that. And I have tons of those people, let me tell you.
And what's that one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
So I think when people actually see me, I think they're surprised that I'm young, or and I've built this, right. So very funny. What happens most often is when I'm with some colleague of mine who's sometimes could be an older gentleman or a guy, they automatically believe that I'm the young kid on trailing that person, and the person alongside me is the decision maker, and then they're like, oh, but she's the founder and the boss, and they're like, really? So I think, and that's good. I'm glad people have that reaction. But yeah, people are extremely surprised with, I think, the fact that I'm young. And I think the other thing is that when people meet me, I'm very serious and focused on my workplace, and I take it very seriously. But I've tried very hard to promote a very healthy, balanced life to the people around me, because that's the other thing I think that women get very bogged down with, where they feel guilty about having a personal life. They feel guilty about celebrating personal milestones. And I'm like, hey, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but I want you to be okay, and I want you to very openly express and enjoy the fact that you do have a great personal life along with it. I don't think it's one over the other. It shouldn't be. So people are also sometimes surprised that I'm very open and expressive about it. Like, I mean, fun fact, I'm actually getting married in 2 months. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And people are like, oh, but how are you running a company and getting married and expanding your business? And I'm like, I am, because you're not going to ask my fiance that, right? He's also getting married and runs a successful business, but no one's going to be like, oh, but can you get married and handle your workplace? They don't ask him that, right? So people shouldn't ask me that either. So yeah, I think people are surprised about that. And I'm moving like this. I'm doing all of this as once.
But you're going to be in the same city. So this will also be a good time to ask you, what are the plans for Jajabor?
Oh, we have great plans. Like I said, I think we're just getting started, but I don't think I, look at my plans, like I said, in terms of revenue or like, typical tangible goals. Of course, we want to grow to a certain space. For us, we want to work with the most incredible people in the world and tell the most amazing stories. So there's that. But, just to sort of make it a little bit more myopic, COVID kind of slowed our plans down, but we were going global. So in next year, we will definitely be in 2 other countries, Singapore and the US for sure. We're going to increase our workforce by at least 30 to 40%. We've already started 3 new verticals inside the company. Next year, there's going to be 2 more. So we're expanding and growing in all sorts of direction. So next year is going to be a big year. I think COVID slowed us down a little bit, but we're back with a bang. And hopefully we're going to be able to tell these stories all over the world soon.
The other thing I wanted to ask was, what was the last thing you Googled?
What was the last thing I Googled? Where can I get another copy of the Almanac of Naval Ravikant? Because that is my favorite. Because that's my favorite book, and I have some 10 copies, and I keep giving it to people, and I'm always out of copies. So I'm like, I need to find this copy again for myself. But yeah, that is my favorite book of all time.
And now that you talked about your business, right? I'm sure your parents know what you do, but how would they describe what you do if they were just say talking to their family or friends or, colleagues or whoever they're talking to?
The work that I do, which is communications PR, is not a very black and white role. But I think what they do say to people around me is that she's built a great company with incredible talent and they're working with some amazing people telling stories. For them, I think they're most proud about the community of people that I've built. And they sometimes, drop by the office and they see like this group of people just working at it and, building things. I think that's what gets them most excited. Like, I'll be very honest, right? When I decided to quit my very secure, well-paying job to start my business, my mom had a lot of apprehensions, right? Because she just wanted me to be secure. And I'm glad that she gave me that very sound, reality check, right? But my dad was the dreamer. He said, it's okay, even if you fail, what will happen? You'll sort of bounce back. So I'm very lucky to come from a household that gives me two very amazing perspectives. My mom keeps me really grounded and my dad's always pushing me to soar. So even today when I'm building, and like I said, my business has new challenges, right? Whether it's expansion or building the team and things like that. My mom will always give me the most sound advice and my dad will always encourage me to go and build something crazy. So it's great fun getting that advice. And I think the third thing is my fiance is also an incredible entrepreneur and he actually comes from a completely diverse background. He comes from a family business and, there's so much learning there as well, right? Which is why I said I'm so lucky to be surrounded by so many amazing perspectives that it gets me to build decisions in a very different way. So I think that's fantastic as well.
I think throughout this whole conversation that we've had, I think you've really shown different parts of entrepreneurship. The parts where it's tough but doable, parts where your family needs to come in to support you,
100%.
And of course, keep you grounded while asking you to dream and reach out for the skies and do all the things that you want to do and your heart is set upon doing.
100%.
And of course, having a supportive fiance, I suppose that also helps a lot.
Absolutely. Actually, Krista, you brought up something so important. I think, again, with entrepreneurship and building, you do need a great support system around you, right? Whether it's your family, immediate family, or partner, it's important to have that because when you come home at the end of the day, you do need sometimes encouragement, sometimes nurturing, sometimes somebody just sitting next to you and say, hey, it's going to be okay. I think that is important. And again, I'd love that people like you and I are able to normalize that conversation. It's very strange, but till a couple of years ago, I did meet and I still meet people and women specifically who are scared to talk about this, right? They're saying, no, we don't want to talk about this publicly and all of that. I was like, why? I think it's up to us to build a narrative or to sort of build a foundation for the next generation of women coming into the workforce to say, hey, it's okay. And the reason why, for example, I talked about, my fiance getting married is because I want to tell all of these young women entering the workforce saying that just because you're building a dream company does not mean that you don't get to have a personal life. I want women to know that you can choose to do whatever you want. You want to build a business, build it. You want to get married, build it. You want to do both, you can do it. But let's normalize and encourage women to feel that you actually can have it all. You just have to prioritize and have great assistance and use tools. It's all possible.
Yeah, I think that conversation is very much part of what entrepreneurship is about, right? Because we don't want it to be very lopsided. Like building a business is just about you not sleeping, going 24/7 and just doing everything about the business and leaving the people in your life, the people that you love, is like hanging by the sidelines, not knowing whether they're supposed to come and disturb you or have a good chat with you. So it's okay to talk about things like that.
Absolutely. And, here's the secret tip that I got from one of my greatest mentors, where, there are days where you will have to prioritize your business, but basically everything in life is cyclic, right? So you have to basically have a conversation saying, hey, listen, for the next 2 months, this is my priority and I'm going to prioritize this more than anything else, which could be a business, it could be a leader, it could be expansion. And then at some point you have to be like, okay, now for the next 2.5, 3 weeks, maybe I prioritize this. Okay. So basically there's no set formula, but it's possible to get it all done if you just have very focused bursts, right? Because you cannot permanently have something in a state of fire or a state of urgency. It just doesn't happen like that, right? So you just have to optimize your time, and like I said, build simple systems. Just do things on time. You do by the way have to sacrifice on something. I think there's a great article I read by Mark Zuckerberg's sister, if I'm not wrong, where she talked about at any given time you can only focus on 4 or 5 things. Now you pick what those 4 or 5 things are: family, friends, social life, health, business. Now you figure out what those top 4 things are and focus on that, and say for the next 1 year, this is my focus, and so on and so forth. So I think I want to be very clear that this is all that I'm possibly going to be able to do, but I'll do it really well, and it works out.
Regardless of whether you're in business or not, we all need to prioritize our time, what we want to do, who we want to spend it with, especially in today's world where everything is coming at us. And you working in the agency, running an agency, I mean, you probably have a lot more than the rest of us. So this would really be a good way to ask you. So where can people find you if they want to connect with you online, Upasna?
Great. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, and you can just search for my name, Upasna Dash, and I look at my LinkedIn very regularly. You can find me there. I'm also on Instagram, Upasna_Dash. I think those are the 2 quickest way to find me. And then of course there's email. My email is Upasna, my name, @Jajabor, JAJABOR.io.
Whoever who's listening right now will really take to heart and really understand that there are so many ways to build a business, and there's so many ways to build it and have something that you've built. In a way, your legacy, right? Because you're the first of your generation.
Just a thank you. And like I said earlier, is that it's so great to have people like you have these conversations together. You can actually change the dialogue, right? Like if you hadn't asked me these questions, I don't think I would have even taken stock of those things. And just to be able to do that is really interesting. And I think, people like you and the platforms that you're building are so important for other women to hear and understand. And I think the biggest message is that any woman who's listening this, right, A, you're not alone. B, remember, there is no one way to success. You get to build your own way. Just believe in yourself and build a great community of cheerleaders around you. You can get anything you want to get done. So just focus on that. Chris, thank you so much. Looking forward to speaking again.
Upasna and I had a delightful conversation, as you can hear from this episode. Perhaps she's a communicator, and that's why our conversation became so animated and exciting. Or perhaps she's a born storyteller, able to bring to life all the little and big anecdotes that tell us more about who she is and what she stands for. Get the show notes, links, and more from womenpreneurasia.com. And while you're there, subscribe to get my email. And did you know you can also send me an audio message? All the good stuff when you head over to the website. I love telling stories, and that is why you're here with me. Like me, you're curious about the women in my podcast, the women whose stories are different and yet each with their own hopes and dreams. Whatever your story is, make sure you spend time writing it down. A blog is a great place to start. I have had a blog for 20 years. Yes, I didn't start with a podcast back then. And back then, I used a blog to record my thoughts and stories. I still keep a blog to remind myself of stories that I may have forgotten. So, whatever it is, your story is precious, important, and significant. Make sure you find a way to keep the stories alive. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I will see you